Hi students, welcome to Sunil's tutorial. I'm Sunil Mirwani and today we'll be doing this chapter called as nervous coordination. Now let's see spinal cord, guys. We're going to study about spinal cord today. Now what is spinal cord? Spinal cord is the posterior part of the central nervous system. It is the posterior part of central nervous system. It is the posterior part of the central nervous system. Now, it is a continuation of medulla oblongata and it comes out of the cranium through an opening called as the foramen magnum. It is a continuation. It is a continuation of medulla oblongata. It is a continuation of the medulla oblongata and it comes out of cranium. It comes out of cranium through an opening called foramen magnum. Right? Now, let's try to understand the spinal cord. It runs dorsally within the vertebral column and is well protected within the three meninges with cerebrospinal fluid. It runs dorsally within vertebral column and is well protected within the meninges with cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid. Fine. Now what is it? It is a thin cylindrical, slightly dorsoventrally flattened and 18 inch in length. It is thin cylindrical. Slightly dorsoventrally flattened and 18 inches in length. Fine. Now it is not uniform in thickness. It shows two slight enlargement. Now let's see the diagram, guys. Can we see the diagram? Now, this is my spinal cord. It is not uniform in thickness. It shows two slight enlargement, one in the cervical region and the other in the lumbar region. Now, from these enlargements, you have spinal nerves which are given out for the forelimbs and the hind limbs. So, you would have forelimbs, spinal nerves coming out from here, hind limbs, spinal nerves coming out from here. Fine. The spinal cord extends from the first lumbar vertebra, extends up to the first lumbar vertebra, sorry. The terminal end of the spinal cord is called as conus medullaris. Only meninges continue beyond the first lumbar vertebra up to the coccyx to form the filum terminale. 31 pair of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. All of them are of mixed type. Right? So you have 31 pairs coming out from here. They are mixed spinal cord, that is, they are sensory as well as motor, and you have it has two enlargements. Let's write this much down, then we'll move ahead. Right? It is not uniform. It is not uniform in thickness. It is not uniform in thickness, and it shows two slight enlargements. Shows two slight enlargements. It shows two slight enlargements, one in the cervical region and the other above the lumbar region. One in the cervical region and the other above the lumbar region. Right? From these two enlargements, spinal nerves are given out to the forelimbs and the hind limbs. From these two enlargements, spinal nerves are given out to the fore limbs and hind limbs. Fine. The spinal cord extends up to the first lumbar vertebra. Spinal cord extends up to first lumbar vertebra. Okay. The terminal end of the spinal cord is called as terminal end of spinal cord is called as conus medullaris. Fine. The spinal cord only meninges continue beyond the first lumbar vertebra. Only meninges continue beyond the first lumbar vertebra. Up to coccyx in the form of film terminale. Right? 31 pair of spinal nerves. 31 pair of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. Arise from spinal cord. All the spinal nerves are of mixed type. All the spinal nerves are of mixed type. Right? So that's your spinal cord. Now let's see the TS of spinal cord. before I go through this, just let's see this. Can you just see the diagram of spinal cord once again? You have 8 pairs of spinal nerves, 12 pair of thoracic nerves, and 5 pair of lumbar nerves, right? You have the cervical enlargement and you have lumbar enlargement. Here you can see the conus medullaris. The conus medullaris is the spinal cord, that's the terminal end of the spinal cord, and after that you have only meninges continuing from the first lumbar vertebra to the coccyx, and this is the terminal end which is called as the filum terminale. These are the sacral and the coccygeal spinal nerves, right? So that's your entire structure of spinal cord. Now let's see the TS of spinal cord. Now when I look at the TS of spinal cord, guys, when I look at the TS of spinal cord, you can see that the TS of spinal cord shows the following structure. It has an H-shaped grey matter made up of nerve cells within white matter of nerve cells. So here's your grey matter which is within white matter, and this is H-shaped, right? The H-shaped grey matter has 2 dorsal or posterior horns and 2 ventral or anterior horns. These are 2 dorsal horns and these are 2 ventral horns. Okay. The central canal passes through the center of the grey matter. There's your central canal, right? The central canal is surrounded by epithelium, that is, it is surrounded by ependyma and is filled up with cerebrospinal fluid. It's an epithelium type of a cell, ependyma, and it is filled up with cerebrospinal fluid. It is actually the ependyma that secretes the cerebrospinal fluid. Now the TS of spinal cord is slightly dorso-ventrally flattened with dorsal and ventral fissure. This is the dorsal fissure, this is the ventral fissure. The dorsal fissure is not that deep, you have a very deep ventral fissure. Fine. The ventral fissure is deeper than the dorsal one. Now the spinal cord acts as a highway for transmitting impulses through sensory adjuster and motor neurons. It is the center for reflex action. It is a connecting link between the brain and the spinal nerves, and it conducts both sensory and motor impulses from and to the brain and the body. So that's your TS of spinal cord. Let's write this down, guys. TS of spinal cord. TS of spinal cord shows the following features. First, an H-shaped grey matter H-shaped grey matter made up of nerve cells, within white matter of nerve fibers. Within white matter of nerve fibers. Right? Next, the H-shaped grey matter has 2 dorsal horns. The H-shaped grey matter has 2 dorsal, which are also called as posterior horns, and 2 ventral horns. Right? A central canal passes through the center of the grey matter. A central canal passes through the center of the grey matter. Right? The central canal is surrounded by ependyma central canal is surrounded by ependyma, which is made up of epithelial cells, and filled up with cerebrospinal fluid. And filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Right? The ependyma secretes the cerebrospinal fluid. Ependyma secretes the cerebrospinal fluid. Right? The TS of spinal cord is slightly dorsoventrally flattened. The spinal cord in TS, spinal cord is slightly dorsoventrally flattened with dorsal and ventral fissures. Dorsal and ventral fissure. Fine. The ventral fissure is much deeper than the dorsal one. Ventral fissure is much deeper than dorsal one. Right? Now, let's see the significance of spinal cord. Spinal cord acts as a highway for transmitting. Spinal cord acts as a highway for transmitting the impulses through sensory adjuster. And motor neurons. Right? Next, it is the center for reflex action. It is the center for reflex action. And finally, it acts as a connecting link between the brain and the spinal nerves. It acts as a connecting link. It acts as a connecting link between the brain and spinal nerves. Fine. And it conducts sensory and motor impulses to and fro from brain to the body. It conducts sensory and motor impulses to and fro from the brain to the body. Brain to the body. Right, so that's my TS of spinal cord. Next, let's see the formation of a spinal nerve. Now, guys, can you please see this? Can you see this diagram, please? You have 31 pair of spinal nerves which originate from the spinal cord. Each spinal nerve is formed by the union of dorsal and ventral root. Dorsal and ventral root. Okay, of the gray matter. the dorsal root is sensory, whereas the ventral root is motor. This is my sensory root, this is my motor root. Okay. Now, I can say that thus the spinal nerve is of mixed type because it has both sensory as well as the motor impulses. The spinal nerve emerges out of the vertebral column through invertebral foramen. The hole through which it comes out is called as the invertebral foramen. I don't think that's shown to you in this diagram. Okay, let's move on ahead. Each spinal nerve, after emerging out of the vertebral column, divides into three branches. Here I'll show you the three branches. One is ramus dorsalis. Here's my ramus dorsalis. Then you have ramus ventralis, and then you have ramus communicans. Right? Now, ramus dorsalis is a short dorsal branch of the spinal nerve that goes to the skin and the muscles of the back. Ramus ventralis is a prominent branch of the spinal nerve and is supplied to the skin, muscles of the ventral and the lateral part of the bodies. And ramus communicis is the connecting link between the main spinal nerve and the sympathetic nervous system through sympathetic ganglion. So those are the three functions that are there. Right? Let me just write this much down. Let's see the formation of spinal nerve. Formation of spinal nerve. I can say 31 pair of spinal nerves originate from the spinal cord. 31 pairs of spinal nerves originate from the spinal cord. Right? Each spinal nerve is formed by the union of dorsal and ventral roots. Dorsal and ventral roots of grey matter. Fine. The dorsal root is sensory while the ventral root is motor in nature. Dorsal root is sensory while the ventral root is motor in nature. Fine. Now, thus the spinal nerve is a mixed type of nerve or sensory motor nerve. Thus, the spinal nerve is a mixed type of nerve. Spinal nerve is a mixed type of nerve, or sensory motor nerve. Right? Spinal nerve emerges out of the vertebral column. Spinal nerve emerges out of the vertebral column through invertebral foramen. Through an invertebral foramen. Right? Each spinal nerve, after emerging out of the vertebral column, divides into three branches. Each spinal nerve, after emerging out of the vertebral column, emerging out of the vertebral column divides into three branches. Divides into three branches. The ramus dorsalis, the ramus dorsalis, the ramus ventralis, and the third is the ramus communicans. Right? Now, the ramus dorsalis is a short dorsal branch of the spinal nerve. Is a short dorsal branch of the spinal nerve. Is a short dorsal branch of the spinal nerve, and it goes to the skin. It goes to the skin and muscles of the back. Ramus ventralis is a prominent branch of the spinal nerve. Branch of the spinal nerve is a prominent branch of the spinal nerve, and it is supplied to the skin. It is supplied to the skin and skin and muscles of the ventral and muscles of the ventral and lateral parts of the body. Right? Ramus communicans. Is a connecting link between the main spinal nerve, and sympathetic nervous system through sympathetic ganglion. So that's my formation of the spinal nerve, right? Okay, we'll stop this here for the day. Thank you very much.